My name is Martha Woeste, Woeste. My maiden name was Mesmer, Messmer. I grew up in northern Kentucky, Cold Spring, Kentucky.
Okay, we'll stop right there for a moment and let me ask you your birth date first.
Okay, my birth date is July 6, 1936.
Okay, and then I will introduce myself. I'm Catherine Kidder, and and today is today is September 7th, 2020, and I am with Martha Woeste. So Martha, you can go on and tell us who were your parents?
My parents were Peter and Rose Mesmer. My mother's maiden name was March. My father was a florist and a farmer.
And this was in Kentucky?
Cold Spring, Kentucky.
Uh-huh.
Just south of Cincinnati by about 10 miles.
Okay. And your grandparents' names are what?
My grandparents' names were George and Anna Mesmer. I only ever knew one grandparent, and that was George. He lived with us until he died in 1942.
So you were born in Cold Springs, and were you born in a hospital or at home?
No, I was born in a second story of a house, and my mother said it was 103 degrees at the time.
Do you know who attended her? Was it a physician or a midwife?
She had a midwife. I'm not sure. There may have been a physician eventually, and his name would have been Dr. Pengley.
So is that where you grew up?
Yes, I grew up and I lived there for the first 20 years of my life until we were married in 1956.
Had your grandparents and parents grown up there as well?
Yes. Well, my grandfather, who I knew, lived in Cold Spring, Kentucky. Actually, originally they came from Baden-Baden, Germany, or the Alsace-Lorraine area. It's pretty much all the same.
So he himself was an immigrant, and his wife as well? You said you didn't know her, so.
I did not know her, yeah. But as far as I know, she was probably born in Kentucky.
What memories do you have of your early years before you went to school?
Before I went to school? Well, we had lots of people around our house, always, because my father and mother raised 3 nephews whose mother had died in childbirth. So they lived with us at our home, as well as my grandfather. And we generally had several hard hands who worked between the farm and the greenhouse. So they were always around our dinner table.
Did you have siblings also?
Yes, I have two sisters and two brothers.
And everybody was around the dinner table.
And everybody was around the dinner table.
Wow.
My mother cooked 3 meals a day, every day.
That must have been quite an experience.
Yes.
But were the children of the same age, similar age to you?
Well, we're 2 years apart.
Kick them off. Kick them off. Charlie.
Charlie was born in 30. My sister Loretta was born in 32. My sister Mary was born in 34. I was born in 36, and my brother was born in 30.
Okay. And then the three other, those children were in that group, right? Yeah. Well, no, they won't. What about the other
nephews?
children?
The nephews were quite a bit older. They were probably in their teens as when I was a youngster. My one who I was actually closest to was in World War II. A cousin lived next door to us, and he was frequently also at our home because there was just lots of activity there all the time. He unfortunately was killed in the service.
Your house must have been a large one. What do you remember about your house?
Well, the girls had a room and the boys had a room. And the hired man lived in one of the rooms upstairs, one of the hired men. Another one of the hired men stayed in the greenhouse in the florist. When my cousins were there, they shared a room upstairs. So we were pretty full.
Your farm must have been a good sized one.
Well, yes, my father raised vegetable crops and hay. And then the greenhouse was the bigger part of his life. He raised cut flowers and potted plants. And the cut flowers he used for funeral work and took quite a bit of it over to Cincinnati into a commission house over there.
Was your mother involved in the florist work or the greenhouse?
In the later years, she was. She helped with the floor work, mostly doing ribbons and helping with the cut flowers. But earlier on, she was pretty busy.
Yes, I believe. So were you involved with any of those things or the housework?
Oh, yes. Well, we helped some with the cooking. My mother also canned just about everything. We had vegetables that we canned. We had fruit that we canned.
Meat.
Just about everything. We made ketchup. We made chili sauce. We made everything you could do with tomatoes. And that's pretty much what we ate throughout the winter. Everything that we had canned.
Did you keep that up, that practice up in your later life?
I did a few times and then decided that it was too much work, and I gave it up.
Yeah, there was a lot of work in food preparation to be done for such a large household. So,
Right.
and then you using all those things that were being grown on your farm would be really important.
Right. Oh, my father also made wine.
Oh, wonderful. What kind of wine?
Mostly grape, but elderberry, cherry. I think most of these old timers, old German people made wine from about anything they could. I never drank at that point in my life ever, much to my dad's disappointment, I guess, because
So you can't comment on the quality of the product.
nope, can't comment on it.
Okay. So when you went to school, where did you go to school?
I went to school about 4 miles from where I lived. I went to a parochial school, St. Philip's. For the first 20 years of my life, I walked out the road to catch a bus. And that was probably close to a half a mile every day. Rarely did we get a ride because it was during the war for a lot of those years, and there was a rationing for gas and sugar and several items. So
Tires.
so we walked to
Yeah.
the bus every day and back home.
Was the weather an issue?
Some days the weather was an issue, but we managed. I can remember being very cold, trudging through the snow. We had snow. My father did have a rule that if it got below 5, we could stay home. We didn't have to go to school that day.
Well, 6 is pretty cold too.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it made you hardy. So you had other children to walk with when you were
Yes.
making this trek, I
Yes,
presume.
we walked, caught the school bus, and then in my later years, when I went to work, I caught the Green Line bus, which was the city bus.
Mm-hmm. Did you remember activities or teachers from your school years that stand out?
Well, playing ball with my brothers and sisters, riding a bike, that was about it. We
Favorite teacher.
we did play some with the neighbors and with our cousins, of course, but don't have a lot of memories of playing games. Monopoly later, but you know.
When you went to high school, was that the same situation that you got the bus?
Correct. Caught the bus, went to St. Thomas High School. It was about 10 miles from where I lived. It was a parochial school. It's no longer a school. It was a small school. There were 27 in my class. And pretty much the same people I had gone to grade school with went to that Catholic school.
Did you have favorite subjects or not favorite subjects?
Well, I guess my favorites, I hated math, so whatever. My favorite subjects in high school was typing and shorthand.
Were you involved in any activities in high school?
I guess we had a debate class. That was about the only one that I participated in. Having to catch the bus and get back home sort of eliminated too many participations in sports. And there weren't that many at the small school that I was in. There was a basketball team. And we did go to most of their games, basketball games. And we had several plays that we were involved in that our school did, but those were about the only activities.
When you were in high school, did you have a career interest for the future?
I guess pretty much to be a secretary was what I planned to do. And that's what I did after I graduated.
Did you go to secretarial school?
Well, just what I learned at high school, in high school.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I was secretary for right after graduation. I was a secretary, stenographer for Tobias Hat Company in Cincinnati. And then I worked for a doctor who was the director of physical medicine and rehabilitation at the VA hospital in Fort Thomas, Kentucky. And I was secretary there. And then for the few months after we were married, I worked in Owenton, Kentucky, where John was a assistant county agent. And I worked as secretary for the president of RECC.
And how did you and John meet, Martha?
I'm sorry, how did we meet?
Mm-hmm.
We met in that area. Every church would have a festival in the summer, and it would be a chicken dinner and then a dance at the end of the evening. So that's where we met, at a church festival dance. And I met him when I was quite young. We dated for about 4 years before we were married.
Oh, so you met before you were out of school, or
Correct.
after you were already?
Yes.
Okay. Uh-huh.
He went to a county high school about 12 miles from where I lived. He went to Campbell County High School. That was the county high school, the public school.
Was education important in your family? Did other siblings go
Uh,
on to school or?
we did not. Uh, it seems in that area of the country, so many of the people just worked in Cincinnati after they graduated. And in fact, John was at a public high school where there were 78 students in his class, and he was only one of 3 who went to the University of Kentucky.
I think that maybe was part of the era as well as the location.
Correct.
That it wasn't so common to, there were still people that weren't finishing 8th grade, so
Mm-hmm.
high school was an achievement, yes. So then somehow you ended up in Gainesville. How did that happen?
Well, right, right. A few months after we were married, John was in the military. He took ROTC at the University of Kentucky. And so he had a commission, and we went to San Antonio, Texas in December of 56. And then we were in San Antonio, Houston, Texas, Biloxi, Mississippi, and Columbus, Ohio. Then we went to Richmond, Kentucky, where he was hired back as a county agent. And shortly after, he was invited to join the Wisconsin, go to Wisconsin and get his master's and PhD. So we went to Madison, Wisconsin, where he got his degrees in personnel management and extension administration. And at that time, then we moved to Florida. He was offered the job in 1976 to come to Florida. So that's how we ended up here.
Okay. And did you join the Agricultural Women's Club soon after that?
I joined right away. I remember the first event was a picnic at Lake Wahlberg. And it was a good opportunity to meet lots of the faculty and their families. And that was probably my first experience with the Agricultural Women's Club.
Do you remember what that picnic was like?
Well, I think it was probably a potluck. I don't remember much about it. I'm pretty sure it was a potluck. And maybe the main entree was catered. I'm not sure about that.
Did you have children by then who accompanied you to the picnic?
Yes, I'm sure that our children accompanied us. 5 of our children went through the University of Florida in various degrees. My oldest daughter stayed in Wisconsin and graduated from the University of Wisconsin in Madison. So at that time, all of the children would have been with us. Our youngest was just in kindergarten. So I'm sure they were all with us.
Do you remember who would have invited you to the club or told you about it?
I would guess it was Ray and Andrew. That's most likely who. They lived in our neighborhood, and so we became quite close to them. And
what were your expectations when you joined?
I suspect it was just to meet new people and get to know them and enjoy their company.
And at the time, who was eligible to be a member of the club?
I think it was the wives of the agricultural faculty who were eligible to be members.
So you were meeting people who were in similar position to you and their families as well, right?
Right.
Yeah. So what was your role in the club?
I'm not sure. I guess just being the wife of an extension faculty member.
Did you were you involved in any committees or offices or anything like
The
that?
committees was mostly the social committees was what I was involved with. We did lots of things. From time to time, we did every Christmas we would do a Christmas social, and it was kind of a dress-up affair. And other activities I remember were a Western theme party and a casino party, and we did quite a lot of things. And at one time, I remember that we baked food and took it to new faculty members, inviting the wives to the club. I know that at one time, the club must have had 80 or more members. It was quite active, and I think everyone enjoyed the club.
Those theme parties and things like that, or where did the activities take place?
Some of the activities took place at the clubhouse of the University Wives Women's Club. Others took place at Farm Bureau. Others took place at the it's a
women's club, isn't it?
No, others took place at the forestry building out
at the Austin Carey Forest.
Austin Carey Forest. Yes.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I guess some of the activities actually took place at various homes.
And did these activities normally include the husbands?
Always our Christmas parties involved the husbands. I think about 4 times a year we would have an event, and if memory serves me right, the husbands were invited to those events. Some of them were quite well attended.
Yes, as you described the venues, the membership was quite large, and then if you had spouses, you would need these larger places. So was there ever dancing and things like that at the party?
I remember dancing at the Western party. Other than that, I don't remember too much of the activities involved.
Do you remember preparing a lot of food for events? Or wasn't that part of it?
I think probably some of them were catered events. Others were potluck.
Do you Did you find any conflict with your family activities and being engaged in a social club like that?
No, our children were quite involved with school, and they they I didn't notice that there was any conflict. They pretty much had their own activities. They were very involved in their own classwork.
Did you ever become an officer of the organization?
I was never an officer.
Mhm.
I really did not like club work very much.
Okay, okay. Someone mentioned that um, the members didn't necessarily have a choice in whether they got engaged in the club, because when you got the membership list in the booklet in the fall, it would tell you that you were on a certain committee for some event, and so you couldn't avoid being
That's
somebody.
true. That's true. Yes.
So you probably were on some, well, you
I
said
was
you were
on I
in the
was on
social
quite a few of the
activities.
committees. I was not an officer, but I may have been a co-chairman of some of those events, but I was never an officer.
Did the Agricultural Women's Club have an impact on the community around us?
Well, they were always very involved with the university women's club.
What about with students, an impact on students at the university?
With the students, well, they the the part that they were involved with the students was the scholarship funds. And
Okay.
over the years, the agricultural women's group contributed $61,100 to fund 109 scholarships for the U.S. students in food and agriculture sciences. And in later years, we were able to add 3 individually funded women's club scholarships. The Dr. Al Warnick donated $500 a year to honor his wife, Barbara, a past president, and Carol Tishner gave $500 a year to honor Dr. Doris Tishner, who was a UF professor and a dedicated member of the scholarship committee. And Dr. E.T. York endowed the BAM C. York Scholarship. Finally, when the club disbanded, we endowed 2 scholarships at the UF Foundation, the Agricultural Women's Club Scholarship and the Deanne S. Connor Scholarship. Combining the $61,100 awarded and the current value of the endowment fund, we are proud to have contributed more than $113,000 in scholarships to UF students. So that was a large part of the university agricultural women's club.
Thank you. I appreciate your including that in our records. It was an important achievement. Where did that money come from, Martha?
Well, often at Christmas parties, my husband was active in meeting all the people at the club and visiting with them and inviting them to donate to the scholarship fund. And so a lot of that money came from that particular event. Others came during the year as we had our book that was printed with our members, and frequently people would add a few dollars along the way for a scholarship fund. And so that added to the amounts.
So the funds were from the members pretty much, and not from outside solicitors.
Right. The members of the Agricultural Women's Club pretty much donated all. We also would generally at Christmas time would have a large ring or a nice pin that a jeweler would donate. And so chances were taken on that. And that was another way that we got funds.
So it was a raffle that people would buy tickets for and have a drawing to give this piece of jewelry.
Right. It generated quite a large amount.
And I think your husband was involved in that was what he was trying to sell.
Oh yes, yeah. He would encourage people to donate or bribe, whatever.
Yes, I think people remember that. Some people have mentioned that before, that it was a lot of fun when he made it a lot of fun, and then he also provided, got everybody involved in entertainment afterwards. You remember that?
Yes, we used to sing the 12 days of Christmas. Well, we also sang Christmas songs, but we would also sing the 12 days of Christmas, which got to be quite interesting because each table would jump up as we went to the 12 days of Christmas. The first days, all the way up to the 12th, and then people enjoyed doing that.
So you remember the club as a place of enjoyment and relaxation, friendship?
Yes, very much so. Friendships were developed, and we had fun along the way, even though it was work. We enjoyed being in the club.
What did you? Well, you were a member for a long time. That would have been from what, 1976
till it's disbanded.
Mm-hmm. So, what changes did you see as time passed?
Well, the biggest change was the numbers dwindling, and the faculty who did not participate in the later years as much as the ones in the early years did.
So, how do you feel about that, and the fact that the club did not survive?
Sad to see the involvement dwindling, but I guess most clubs experience that same problem. As people got more involved in their children, they just did not need that social activity, I guess, that we did in the earlier years.
Times changed and activities with them, I guess. So, do you think that there was any impact on your children or your husband that of your being involved with the group?
Um, our children, I are pretty involved in activities also, so maybe they saw us participating and feel like they need to do that same thing.
As you think back to the long history of the club, which was founded in 1908 and was disbanded this year in 2020. Were you aware of that long history when you joined? Or what it must have been like for those early members? Did that ever?
Well, I think in those early members, it was definitely a social activity. They were not, there was not as much happening in the community at that time, I'm sure, as in the later years. And so I think they pretty much depended on the Agricultural Women's Club to provide them with social activities.
What do you suppose they would think if they saw the world now? The social world.
I'm just not sure. I know for one thing, there was not as much activity among the children at that time. They didn't have soccer and all the sports events that our children participated in, for instance. So they, I guess they pretty much relied on those club activities for their entertainment.
Well, I really appreciate your sharing your thoughts on this, Martha, and your recollections. Is there anything else that comes to mind as you think about your time with the Agricultural Women's Club?
Well, I guess I can't really think of too many more things. Our children also became very good friends with some of the children of the faculty members, and to this day are friends and spend time together, and that's a good thing.
Hmm.
5 of our children went through the university here, and of course they had lots of opportunity to meet lots of the faculty members and their families. So early on, particularly while they were in school, we had parties here at the house, and the children would come visit for swimming parties and whatever.
Well, it sounds like for you, as for many, that this club has been a source of pleasure and good for families as well. You've said that very, very well. Before we finish, I'd like to ask you a current question on a totally different subject. This has been, 2020 is an extraordinary year with the pandemic, and I'd be very interested to know how all of this is affecting you and your family.
Well, it has been difficult because, well, just this very weekend, one of our granddaughters was playing soccer in Jacksonville, and we were not able to attend because there was a limitation to how many could attend the soccer game. We have a daughter who lives here in Gainesville. She has her engineering degree from the university and works with road construction. We have been able to visit with them, although on a limited basis. Our daughter in Wisconsin, we visited most of the summer, and of course it was different because we could not attend the restaurants that we like to go to, the supper clubs up there, and we were pretty much limited to staying home. Our other children, we stopped and visited in West Lafayette on our way home. Our son is there at Purdue. We visited with the children, but on a limited basis, and lots of no hugs, which is kind of difficult when you're with your grandchildren. Our other sons are here in Florida. We have not visited with them, although we would have loved to have, because we miss the grandchildren. So we Zoom. Every Thursday night we Zoom with the family and all the grandchildren who can. And that's the way we've kept in touch. It's been difficult, but being able to Zoom with them and see them is a big help.
Do you think your attitudes have changed through, it's now almost 6 months, so from the beginning to this point that we're at now?
Well, we're still wearing our masks, and most of our family is also, so I think all of them are. I'm not sure what's going to happen now with the children back in school. Hopefully that's not going to affect it too drastically. I have a daughter who's a teacher in Orlando, and she is having to do in school teaching, as well as, what's the other word?
Electronic.
Hmm.
Electronic.
Electronic teaching. So I think it's a doubly hard for teachers who have to do that. Another one of our grandsons is at NYU, and he's having to go in several days a week. But he has spent most of the spring and summer pretty secluded in New York in his apartment. So hopefully we'll find a cure for this before too long. Two
Thank
of
you.
our sons are physicians, and they're in the thick of it, you might say. So we have not been able to visit with them. We just Zoom with them.
Well, I think that you've described the situation that so many of us are in. You've done it very well. I do thank you for taking the time to record these thoughts on all the subjects. And is there anything else that comes to mind that you wanted to say but we haven't discussed?
I don't believe so. I'm sorry to see the Ag Wives Club disband, but I understand it's the way it is.
Well, it's very much appreciated that you have contributed to the history of the club, which we can at least leave for people to understand what some of that experience was for you and many others. So thank you again. I will now end the recording with much appreciation to you.
Thank you, Kathy.